The first time I saw that glint in the dirt, I thought it was just a trick of the light. The sun was low, angling through the red pines and throwing everything into that warm gold that makes even mud look magical. I was setting up camp along a ridge that overlooked a quiet bend in the river. No other footprints, no tyre tracks, not even the faint trace of a fire ring. The kind of place that feels like you're the first to ever stop there, though you know deep down that can't be true. I'd dropped my pack and gone out with my hatchet to gather firewood when my boot nudged something hard, something that didn't belong in the forest floor's usual clutter of pine cones and roots. I squatted down, brushed away the top layer of needles, and there it was, flat, shaped, deliberate. Not a rock, not nature's work. I could tell right away it was old. The edge was chipped with precision, and the stone itself had that dark, weathered sheen of something that's been waiting a long, long time. I lifted it, feeling its weight, running my thumb along the fine curve of what must have once been a cutting edge. It wasn't my first time finding old things in the woods. Once I'd stumbled across the crumbled foundation of a settler's cabin near the Catskills, but this felt different. This was unmistakably human, yet prehistoric. A tool maybe, a knife or scraper, thousands of years old, and still sharp enough to nick my palm if I wasn't careful. The forest suddenly seemed to hold its breath. The wind quieted. Even the river below seemed to hush. I stood there, heart beating a little too fast, feeling as though I'd stepped out of my time and into someone else's. The thrill hit me hard, the idea that I was holding something made by a person who'd lived and died long before anyone spoke my language, long before the first maps or boundaries or names for these woods. But then came the other feeling, quieter and heavier. I knew the rule. Take nothing, disturb nothing. Artifacts, no matter how small, belong to history, not to hikers. The right thing would be to note the location, leave it in place, maybe even report it later. I looked down at the stone in my hand, half covered in dirt, and for a long moment I hesitated. The forest didn't care what I chose, but I knew that choice said something about me. I turned the stone over in my hand again, studying its shape as the last of the sunlight caught the ridges along its edge. Whoever made it had done so with care. It wasn't just a tool, it was a piece of thought made solid. The flakes were struck in deliberate lines, the kind of skill that only comes from generations of learning passed hand to hand. I could almost imagine the person who carved it, kneeling beside a fire, working a piece of flint with another stone, the rhythmic click echoing across this same stretch of land centuries ago. The thought gave me goosebumps. It felt like touching time itself, but awe has a way of mixing with temptation. My first instinct was to slip it into my pack, not to sell it or show it off, just to keep it safe. A private treasure from the woods, a token of connection. Yet, even as the thought formed, I heard the voice of an old ranger I'd met years ago in Wyoming. He'd told me, "The forest remembers everything you take from it." I hadn't understood him then. Now I did. Removing this little piece of history would mean erasing part of a story that didn't belong to me. Still, the thrill was undeniable. I felt like a kid again, like I'd found buried treasure. And wasn't there something romantic about being its discoverer? I could take it to the local historical society, maybe even have my name attached to it. Artifact discovered by... It was the kind of thought that flared bright, then embarrassed me as soon as I recognised it for what it was, pride disguised as curiosity. I set the stone down on a flat patch of moss and sat back on my heels. The smell of damp earth rose around me. Somewhere down by the river, a loon called, a long, mournful sound that seemed to stretch the distance between centuries. I found myself wondering what the land looked like back then. Before the logging roads, before the campground maps and trail signs. Maybe this ridge had been a lookout, a hunting ground, a gathering place. It wasn't hard to imagine a small fire burning nearby, voices murmuring, someone working by its light. I should have gone back to my chores, still needed firewood, still had to pitch the tent, but I stayed there longer than I meant to, staring at that small patch of dirt where the artifact rested. The fading light made it seem to glow faintly, like it still carried a spark from its maker. That's when the conflict really settled in, not between right and wrong exactly, but between heart and head, between my love of the wild's mystery and the part of me that wanted to keep it untouched. When I finally stood, the air had cooled. I brushed off my knees, looked down once more, and whispered without meaning to, "I'll remember where you are." Then I turned toward camp, carrying the weight of that decision with me, heavier than any pack. Back at camp, the world felt strangely louder, the crackle of twigs underfoot, the hum of insects rising with the twilight, the gurgle of the river below. I went through the motions of setting up my tent, but my thoughts were still half a mile away, circling that stone like a moth to a lantern. Every few minutes, I'd glance back toward the ridge, as if expecting someone to appear there, an archaeologist, a park ranger, or maybe the ghost of whoever had last held that tool. The woods have a way of pressing in on your mind when something's gnawing at it, and that evening, every whisper of the pine seemed to be asking what I planned to do next. Once my tent was staked and my fire ring built, I gathered a pile of fallen branches and started the fire. The flame took quickly, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. I sat close to it, arms wrapped around my knees, staring into the glow. There's something about a campfire that makes the truth impossible to ignore. Its light flickers like memory, bright, then gone, then back again. I thought about calling the nearest ranger station once I got home, maybe marking the GPS coordinates, but that meant drawing attention to this place. I'd found this little clearing by accident, following a deer trail that wasn't on any map. It felt secret, untouched. Reporting it might bring others here. Surveyors, maybe even tourists, people who'd trample the moss and scatter the quiet. That idea twisted in my gut worse than guilt. Wasn't I protecting the place by keeping it secret? Then again, maybe that was just another way of justifying what I wanted. I'd met enough folks in the backcountry who'd done the same, picked up old bottles, arrowheads, fossils, and convinced themselves they were saving them. They weren't. They were just taking, and the land remembers. I fed another branch into the fire and watched it curl and blacken. The smoke drifted low, sweet with pine resin. I thought about how fragile everything out here was. One careless ember could burn a forest. One careless decision could erase a chapter of its story. By the time I cooked my simple dinner of beans and cornbread, the stars were out, sharp and cold and endless. I lay back on my sleeping pad, staring at them through the netting of my tent. Somewhere under those same stars, hundreds of years ago, someone else had slept in this same stretch of forest, maybe with the same scent of smoke in their hair, the same sound of water in their ears. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I could almost feel that other presence, distant but real. The connection was humbling, and it filled me with a kind of quiet resolve. I knew what I had to do, but knowing doesn't always make doing easy. Morning came soft and grey, the kind of dawn that feels more like a sigh than a beginning. Mist drifted low over the river, and the air smelled clean, like wet stone and pine sap. I brewed a cup of coffee over the small fire I'd kept alive through the night, the coals glowing under a thin layer of ash. Each sip grounded me a little more, but my mind was already wandering back to that ridge. I dreamed about the stone tool, saw myself digging it up again and again, only this time when I held it, it crumbled into dust, and the wind carried it off before I could say a word. When I woke, I couldn't shake the sense that the woods were warning me, leave it be. After breakfast, I packed slowly, more slowly than usual, as if stalling could delay the choice I had to make. My plan had been to stay one more night before heading out, but the thought of that object sitting alone in the dirt, my discovery, my secret, made me uneasy. Secrets have a way of spoiling the peace of a place. I decided I'd go back to the spot one last time. The hike up felt shorter than before. My boots followed their own path, drawn by the weight of unfinished business. When I reached the ridge, sunlight was just breaking through the mist, laying a gold band across the forest floor. The patch of disturbed earth where I'd found the artifact was easy to spot. I crouched beside it, half expecting the stone to have vanished, claimed again by time. But it was there, right where I'd left it, resting against a tuft of moss, as if waiting for me to make up my mind. I stood there for a long time, torn between reverence and regret. Every instinct in me as a wanderer, someone who loves the feel of discovery, who keeps a few pebbles and feathers in his pack from past trips, wanted to take it. But another voice, quieter, steadier, told me that leaving it was the only way to truly honour it. This land wasn't mine, and its stories weren't either. I took out my notebook, the one I always carried for sketches and trail notes, and drew a quick map. The river bend, the ridge line, the old oak near the path. I jotted a short description and folded the page carefully, sealing it in a plastic sleeve. That would be my record, proof that I'd found something worth protecting. Before turning to go, I knelt once more and whispered a small promise, though I wasn't sure to whom. Maybe to the land itself, maybe to the person who'd shaped that stone long ago. I promised to speak for the find, but not to claim it. Then I brushed a thin layer of pine needles back over the artifact, hiding it from sight. When I finally started down the trail, I felt lighter somehow, though my steps were slow. The ridge faded behind me, swallowed by the trees, and I knew I'd never come back to that exact place again. Some things are meant to stay hidden, even from the ones who find them. By midday, I'd made my way back to the trailhead where the forest gave way to gravel road and sunlight shimmered on the hood of my truck. The world felt too loud again. The slam of the tailgate, the hum of insects in the weeds, the distant creak of a windmill down the valley. I stowed my pack, but lingered before climbing in, hands resting on the cool metal, my mind still half lost among the trees. It's funny how a single moment, a chance glint in the dirt, can change the rhythm of a trip. What had started as just another weekend in the wild had turned into something far heavier, more meaningful. I sat on the tailgate and unfolded the map I'd sketched. The coordinates were scrawled neatly in the corner, along with the note I'd written that morning. I'd already decided I'd send it to the State Archaeological Office once I was home. It would mean questions, maybe a visit to the site, maybe even restricted access to that patch of woods. But that was all right. If the place truly mattered, it deserved to be known and protected properly, not left to chance and hikers like me. Still, there was a pang in that thought. The wilderness I loved was vanishing bit by bit, not only to development or carelessness, but also to the simple act of being noticed. Sometimes the best way to preserve a place is to leave it unspoken, yet I knew silence could be its own kind of neglect. I'd spent enough nights in burned out campsites and littered clearings to understand that respect only survives when people are taught to feel it. I started the engine, letting it idle, while I took one last look back down the dirt road that led into the forest. The ridge was hidden now behind a screen of pines, but I could picture it clearly, the slope of it, the way the light had touched that small artifact. I wondered who had last stood there with purpose, shaping that piece of stone with their hands. Maybe they too had looked toward the river and thought about what would last after they were gone. As I drove away, the feeling that had followed me all morning began to settle into something quieter. I realized the artifact wasn't the treasure after all, it was the lesson. The real find was the reminder that the stories of this land don't belong to any one of us, but to everyone who's ever walked it, and everyone who still will. That night, back home, I placed the folded map and my notes in an envelope addressed to the Heritage Office. Before sealing it, I paused a moment, remembering the stillness of that ridge, the hush in the air, the shimmer of old stone in the light. Then I closed the envelope and set it aside. Some discoveries are worth more when you let them go.